Hey everybody, welcome to the videos for my first look for week 5 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. Keep in mind, I'm recording this video very early in the week, so a lot of things are going to change by the time Sunday rolls around. But as of right now, just taking a first look at the pricing and trying to build a lineup on first reactions. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. If you want access to all the spreadsheets, all color-coded, nice and neat, all the data you'd ever need. Optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff, link can be found down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're signing over on PrizePicks, you get a free money bonus. It's an instant deposit match up to $100, so it's free money. Want to use it to your advantage? When you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think it'll be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. And up top this week, we have Kyler Murray, $8,000. The price tag is a bit steep, but this should be a pretty high-scoring game versus the 49ers. This game does feature over a 50-point over-under, 7-point spread in the Cardinals' favor, so a pretty high implied team total here. And he's really yet to have a bad game. The first 2 weeks of the season absolutely crushed at 34-38. Past 2 weeks have been down a little bit, 22 and 22, but I mean, it's still been fantastic. I mean, I have nothing bad to say about Kyler Murray. Although, if you guys watch my videos, you know I try to get the best bang for my buck at the quarterback position, so I can't really see myself spending top dollar for a guy like Kyler Murray this week, especially in cash games and tournaments. He's fine, but we can save some money. I typically try to go mid-range at quarterback. I don't punt the position. I don't go with guys like Daniel Jones, Justin Fields each and every single week. Like through the first 4 weeks of the season, I played Jalen Hurts in week 1 in cash, Dak Prescott week 2, Matthew Stafford week 3, then last week I played Jalen Hurts. So I believe each and every single time those guys have been below $7,000. That's usually where I find myself going. So speaking of those quarterbacks, we have Jalen Hurts here, $1,000 cheaper, and I'm going to be honest, his point output hasn't really been too far off of Kyler Murray this season, and he's definitely been running the ball a lot. I mean, he's at a floor of 35 yards so far and a ceiling of 82, which is incredible out of the quarterback position. It's not quite Lamar Jackson, but it's pretty much the next best thing right now. And so far this season, 28, 21, 25, and 31, had nearly 400 passing yards last week, threw the ball 48 times and over 300 yards last week versus Dallas. And no matter the game script, I mean, he should be just fine because they blew out Atlanta week 1, 28 fantasy points. They were getting killed versus KC, getting killed from Dallas, and they still put up really good games. So I think Jalen Hurts, excellent option here. I realize the matchup versus Carolina is perceived as tough, which it may be. It's too early in the season to tell, I think. I think they have a pretty solid defense, but Dallas had no problem with them last week. And with Hurts' rushing ability, it does offer you a very safe floor and a pretty high ceiling as well. So Hurts definitely on my radar this weekend, although I'm not quite sure I'm going to plug him in just yet because there's quarterbacks a little bit cheaper that I do have interest in. In tournaments this weekend, Ryan Tannehill looks pretty interesting at only $6,400. Gets a Charmin-Soft matchup versus Jacksonville, one of the worst defenses in football. Ryan Tannehill has not been great this year. His one good game, I will say, was over 20 points versus Indianapolis. But if A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are out, it's going to be really hard to trust Ryan Tannehill here. Plus, I have so much interest in Derrick Henry this weekend. Like, he should be able to smash Jacksonville. That I think Ryan Tannehill is only reserved for tournaments. But at $6,400, he's definitely on my radar, although we're going to have to monitor some injury news for his wide receivers this week. Although I think the cash game quarterback this week, if Jimmy Garoppolo happens to be out, I mean, it's going to be really hard not to want to play Trey Lance here at only $5,700 because only in a half last week, he was 9 for 18, which I realize is not the best completion percentage. Had a couple bad throws, did have that 76-yard touchdown to DEEBO Samuel, but he had 20.3 fantasy points and a half, had 7 rushing attempts and 41 rushing yards. Like, if we can get a rushing quarterback below 6K, which should be a high-scoring game and a good matchup versus Arizona, I will take that all day. Like, if Trey Lance is starting, you better be playing him in cash games this week because that is pretty much a free square, and he allows you to pretty much get all these spend-up running backs you want this week, which there's 2 smash spots for 2 very expensive running backs that I feel like might be close to must-plays in cash games this week. So $5,700, I would take that all day. Point, but otherwise, assuming he's starting, should be the best option on the entire slate. So moving on to the running back position, we are going to spend a lot of money here. I think we're going to just try to find a way to make it work this week. Now, if Trey Lance is not starting, I'm not sure if the strategy is going to work out. So hopefully, I mean, no offense to Jimmy G, but I really hope he sits this one out this week just so he can play some Trey Lance. Because at $5,700, that's just way too cheap. But up top this week, we have the man, the king, Derrick Henry, $9,000 in a beautiful spot versus Jacksonville. And if you guys don't know his history versus Jacksonville, I swear I don't have any numbers to back this up, which, I mean, I could look it up, but I feel like every single time he plays Jacksonville, it's like 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not sure what it is, but he loves facing Jacksonville. I mean, I guess it makes sense. They've had one of the worst defenses in football the past couple years, but just give me the volume here. Like, the most important thing in cash games is volume. We don't want guys that are going to get lucky with a handful of carries and a handful of targets. We can realistically project over 30 total touches for Derrick Henry pretty much each and every single week, especially in a positive game script, which this one is here versus Jacksonville, and really just DFS in general. You want volume out of your players. So we're going to lock in the volume king, Derrick Henry. I don't see how he doesn't get like over 100 rushing yards and multiple touchdowns in this game. Past 3 weeks, 50, 22, and 28 fantasy points. He's pretty much a lock for the bonus, and I think he's a lock for a touchdown in this game. Plus, he's been getting used in the passing game. Only 2 targets last week, but the other games this season, he saw 3, 6, and 4, and he's caught all but 1 ball this year. So if he's going to give us a little bit of a passing game floor, I mean, even better for Henry. We'll have to see if the receivers are back. If the receivers are back, I mean, maybe it happens to be less volume because they can throw the ball a little bit better, but keep in mind, that's going to open up the run game even more because their defense can't just completely just pack in on the run. They have to worry about A.J. Brown and Julio Jones on the outside. So we'll see what happens, but Derrick Henry, I just don't see how he doesn't smash here. I realize the price is very steep, but I will take it all day, and we can afford him because we have a cheap quarterback in our lineup, and that's the beauty of it. After that, like I said, I'm going to try to jam in both stud running backs this week in amazing matchups. Like we have Henry versus Jacksonville, super soft matchup there. Then we have Dalvin Cook here versus Detroit. They're 7.5-point favorites at home, which is like the perfect setup for a guy like Dalvin Cook. He really couldn't get anything going last week. He did have 6 targets, which was really nice, but only ended the day with 6.4 fantasy points. But that Cleveland defense is really good. Like that's going to be a defense to avoid for the majority of the season. I think Dalvin Cook probably bounces back in a big way here versus one of the worst defenses on football. Dave Montgomery had a smash game versus them before getting hurt. He's going to be out 4 to 5 weeks now, but he had over 100 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Damian Williams even stole a rushing touchdown. Like you can run on this team all day, and this should be able to have a positive game script for Dalvin Cook. And he'll more than likely be more involved than he was last week because he just came back from injury last time out. So Alexander Madison was still obviously getting some work, but I think we see more of a shift here to Dalvin Cook, although we will have to monitor his status throughout the week. But I'm going to assume he's going to be good here, and if he is, he should smash Detroit here. I mean, it's terrible defense, 7.5-point favorite at home. Everything bodes well here, and since we're going cheap at quarterback, we're going to try to make this work. Yes, we only have $4,400 left per player, but we have plenty of cheap wide receivers, defenses, tight ends that we can pick from, so I think this is a pretty good start to the cash game build right now. So then moving on here, I mean, obviously Devontae Adams every single week is going to be in play. It did a little disappointing last week versus Pittsburgh, but I mean, he leads the league in target share. No reason to be concerned about Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson. If we're not playing Dalvin Cook, I don't mind Justin Jefferson because the guy has been very good so far this season, and there's nobody on that secondary that can guard Jefferson. Like, he should be able to feast. I think he's a better tournament play because of that price point. Like, he should have no problem at all carving up that defense. So if you're playing tournaments, do like Jefferson quite a bit. If you wanted to stack Trey Lance, DEEBO Samuel's the guy. I know Brandon Ayuk looked like he was going to start bouncing back, but he only had 3 targets last week. Ended the game with, 1 catch for 15 yards. He's just been such a disappointment. DEEBO Samuel, the main wide receiver in this offense. I don't think that's in question. 12, 10, 8, and 12 targets this year. 38 points last week. 76-yard touchdown from the quarterback that we have in our lineup, Trey Lance, so we don't have to worry about if they have a connection or not. I don't think you have to stack Trey Lance because of his rushing ability. Like, you can play rushing quarterbacks naked. If you're playing a statue at quarterback like Jimmy G or something like that, you're going to want to stack a wide receiver with him. But with guys like Trey Lance, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, you do not necessarily have to stack them, especially in cash games. You can't play them naked, which is what I'm probably going to do here because I don't think I can afford DEEBO Samuel. If I plug in DEEBO Samuel, I'm left with less than $4,000 left per player, which I guess technically we could afford him, but I don't think the lineup's going to look too pretty, especially for a cash game build. In tournaments, yeah, sure, this could work, but don't really see it working out too well here. So we're going to have to dip down to some cheaper wide receivers. I know CeeDee Lamb was pretty disappointing last week, but this is a pretty good matchup versus the Giants. Only 5 targets, 3 targets the week before that. So it's been 2 very poor weeks for CeeDee Lamb. You got to keep in mind that they're blowing out Phillies. They really have to throw the ball too much, so I'm going to kind of cross that game off. But should be a bit of a bounce back week here for CeeDee Lamb. I think he's a little bit too cheap. Amari Cooper still pretty cheap, only $6,100. Had the nice 35-yard touchdown last week, so I think these guys are both in play if you want exposure to the Dallas passing offense. Jamar Chase, only $5,800. I realize it's easier to run on Green Bay than just to throw, but he just seems a bit too cheap. The volume's there mostly. He had 9 targets last week, and he's scored double-digit points each and every single week so far. He's a big play threat. He's also been a touchdown machine so far this season, besides last week versus Jacksonville on Thursday night. So $5,800 though. I do think he's interesting, maybe more of a tournament play, but otherwise he does look pretty good. Jacoby Myers, though, he's someone that I'm very interested this week because he gets volume each and every single week. 14 and 12 targets the past 2 weeks. I know he doesn't score touchdowns. I believe he does not have 1 career touchdown, but he's the wide receiver one of this offense, going to get plenty of looks, and he's facing a very soft Houston secondary. So I think he makes sense in cash games. No, he's not the most exciting play out there, but he should catch like 6 to 8 balls here, have double-digit targets, and I'll take that in a super soft matchup versus Houston. So after that, we're left with $4,200 per player. So once you factor in cheap defenses and tight ends, I think we'll be just fine here. So we'll look for a wide receiver too. With DJ Chark being out, I do like that Tennessee-Jacksonville game. It's only a 4-point spread, surprisingly. And both defenses are not very good. Like, Tennessee's passing defense is terrible, and they're awful versus wide receivers. One of the worst teams in the league. Corey Davis blew up versus them last week, and they've just been getting killed by wide receivers all season long. So one of these Jacksonville wide receivers, I think with DJ Chark being out, should definitely be a pretty solid play. I like Marvin Jones a lot. The problem is he's $5,700. I'm not sure we can quite afford him. But Laviska Shenault had a very good game last week with DJ Shark going down. The only unexciting thing about Shenault is that he's not a big air yards guy. Like, his ADOT is very low. I know he had a 52-yard catch last week, but it's not something I really will expect going through the rest of the season. Although with no DJ Shark, maybe opens up more of a role for him. But had close to 100 yards last week. He's probably going to see close to 10 targets this game. He had 7, 4, 7, 10 so far through 4 weeks. And with DJ Shark, obviously that just makes it a little bit more condensed. And Tennessee is getting killed versus wide receivers this season, and this should be I know both teams aren't that great, but I could see this game end up being high scoring just because of how bad the defenses are. So Shenault at $4,800, don't think he's a bad cash game play because he should get peppered with targets, and I think he's got a pretty safe floor on a PPR site like DraftKings. So once we plug him in, we have just north of $4,000 left remaining. So we should probably plug in a super cheap defense to see what we had to work with at tight end, wide receiver 3 in our flex spot. I usually just try to find the cheapest defense I can that seems viable. And this week, the Washington football team, I realize their defense has been terrible this year. In terms of points they've allowed this season, they allowed 30 versus Atlanta, 43 versus Buffalo, 29 versus the Giants, and 20 versus the Chargers. And fantasy point-wise, hasn't been like terrible, 6, 3, and 7. I would take that all day at $2,300. But typically, they've been super expensive this season. So at $2,300 in a home matchup versus New Orleans versus Jameis Winston, that offense just has not looked right this season. I don't mind that at all. So for $2,300, we'll take the home team and just hope they don't give up like 40 points here. It's going to leave us close to $5,000 left for our last few spots, which I'll probably spend out a little bit at the tight end position. I definitely can't afford a guy like Darren Waller. So I plugged in Darren Waller. That's only going to leave me $3,400 left, which, yeah, you could make it work with 2 punt wide receivers, but I'm not really comfortable going that route, especially for like a shell cash game build. TJ Hawkinson would be interesting versus Minnesota. That game should be pretty high scoring. It's been kind of disappointing the past 2 weeks after a really hot start to the season, but he's still getting the targets. Like last week, he had 8 targets for Chicago. Didn't really do anything versus Baltimore, but we can kind of write that off. He's still one of the better tight ends in football. But I'm looking for a cheap tight end for this build. Guys like Gesicki, Hunter Henry, I think they're playable. Jared Cook was really good on Monday night. If you guys watched that game, absolutely crushed it. A lot of Jared Cook in my 150 max build, 7 targets, 6 catches, 70 yards. Got into the end zone. I felt like he was wide open each and every single play. But Cleveland's defense is pretty tough. This game does have over a 50-point over-under, though. So if you're just looking for a cheap tight end in this game, I think Jared Cook is fine. Max Williams actually looks pretty interesting to me this week. He's actually been pretty good for Arizona. And if you just want exposure to that game, and he's also a run-back option with Trey Lance, so I guess it even makes sense correlation-wise. But he hasn't been that bad. 94 yards in week 2, only 19 yards in week 3, but still 3 targets. Last week versus the Rams, 66 yards, 5 targets, got into the end zone, 17.6 fantasy points. Is he the best tight end out there? No, but if you want exposure to this game and just a run-back option with Trey Lance, we'll just plug in Max Williams right now at $3,400. So with 2 guys left, we have a wide receiver 3 spot and a flex spot open. I think we're going to use the flex one first just so I can get another running back in. If we have to go the running back route, just really quick, in the 6K range, it's kind of littered with some pretty good plays, even a wide receiver. Like CeeDee Lamb's only $6,200, Murray Cooper $6K, James Robinson $6,000, DeAndre Swift I like a lot, $6,100. But I think I'm going to go specifically with a running back here. And I think it's going to be between either DeAndre Swift or Ezekiel Elliott for me. DeAndre Swift, the coach talked to him about weeks, said we're going to see a lot more DeAndre Swift. What do you know? He gets 8 rushing attempts, which is tied for his lowest of the season. And Jamal Williams started the game with like 6 to 7 carries. So whatever, I guess we can't really trust Campbell, although he's still more in the passing game. Has nearly a 20% target share this season. This is a good matchup versus Minnesota. I think DeAndre Swift is certainly in play. If we plugged him in, it leaves us $4,700 left for our last position of wide receiver 3. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really like any of these options. Like Brandon Ayuk makes sense as a pairing option with Trey Lance. It's just good luck trusting Brandon Ayuk this year. And since I'm kind of going towards a cash game build, there's no chance we're going to play Brandon Ayuk in this one. So maybe we should take out DeAndre Swift and look for one of those punt wide receivers, because I feel like the punt wide receivers can give us similar output to some of these guys in the 4K range. So I feel like maybe we should just get a more volume-heavy running back. So if we go specifically to the RB position, I think Zeke Elliott's attainable here at $7,000. Like, it's still a bit cheap. I know Tony Pollard's going to be there. He's going to be a bit of a pain, but Zeke Elliott's still getting around 20 total touches each and every single week. Only had 1 target last week versus Carolina, but the past 3 weeks have been good for him. 17, 26, 23. This is a good matchup as a running back, especially at home versus Giants. He's a home favorite, $7,000. That actually looks pretty good. So if we plug him in, that leaves us $3,300 for our last spot, which there are some punt wide receivers that I do think make some sense this week. Depending on the situation for the Titans, you could look at Westbrook again. I know he wasn't like super exciting, but he still had 8 targets in that game. He only caught 3 of them for 18 yards, which is obviously not what we're looking for, but I mean, if AJ Brown and Julio Jones are out again, I mean, I would take 8 targets at $3,700 all day in a good matchup versus Jacksonville, so you could look at him once again. Josh Reynolds was pretty involved at $3,300. He had 9 targets last week, 6 catches, 11.9 fantasy points. That doesn't look too bad at all either. And all the way at the bottom here for $3,000, we have Curtis Samuel. It's a tougher matchup versus New Orleans, but he had 4 targets last week, caught 4 of them, only 19 yards, 6 fantasy points, and he didn't really play a full allotment of snaps, but assuming the snaps go up, I mean, $3,000, that's going to allow us some flexibility. Like, we could actually probably upgrade a guy like Max Williams because we'd have $4,200 left for our tight end spot. You could get a guy like Jared Cook, Gesicki, and whatever you may prefer. As you can see, it's a pretty flexible slate and there's many ways to go, so it should be a fun one. But if you did find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, then a official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks. It shows you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're a new member over there, as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I'll see you guys on Thursday for the showdown video.